When Grandpa fell down the stairs, my first thought was to bring him soup. Theirs was to call an inheritance lawyer. I didn't know it then, but that difference would reveal a treasure worth $400 million and cost my family everything they thought they deserved. "Emma's here again with her sad little care package," my sister Vanessa announced to the hospital waiting room, not bothering to lower her voice. "I'm honestly embarrassed for her." I froze, clutching the thermos. Every eye turned. The silence felt like a sentence. 30 seconds, I thought, watching my mother's perfectly manicured nails tap against her designer purse in obvious annoyance. 30 seconds in the door, and they're already tearing me apart. While my family had spent the morning whispering about funeral arrangements and inheritance lawyers, I'd been cooking soup and packing crossword puzzles, the same Tuesday routine Grandpa and I had shared for 3 years. The fall had been bad. At 83, he'd tumbled down those steep mansion stairs while trying to fix a loose banister himself. He should have called someone, but he'd always been stubborn about asking for help, maybe because he'd learned that asking this family for anything was like squeezing water from stone. "Room 314, the nurse said after I showed my ID, "but visiting hours don't start until—" "I'm family," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Something twisted in my chest when I saw him lying there, so small beneath the white sheets. Machines beeped around him like electronic heartbeats, and his weathered hands rested motionless on the blanket. This was the man who'd taught me to read when everyone else was too busy, who'd listened to my dreams when no one else cared, who'd once said, "You've always had a mind for patterns, Emma. See connections others miss." And they'd told me not to come. The door opened behind me, and I heard the click of expensive heels on linoleum. My stomach dropped. They were here. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." Vivian's voice cut through the quiet like a blade. "What is she doing here? Did someone forget to spray for bugs?" I turned to face my family. The word felt like swallowing glass. Vivian stood in the doorway, wearing a designer coat that cost more than I made in 3 months, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the harsh hospital lighting. Behind her, my brother Marcus adjusted his Rolex with calculated timing. "Look what the cat dragged in," Marcus said with quiet menace. "Did you take the bus here, Emma? Or did that rolling disaster you call a car actually make it across town?" "I got your text," I said quietly. "I came as soon as—" The text that said family only? My mother, Patricia, swept past me like I was invisible, her Chanel perfume overwhelming the antiseptic smell. "Reading comprehension was never your strong suit, was it?" Marcus exchanged a meaningful look with Derek, who'd driven up from his law practice in the city. "Maybe she got confused," Derek murmured with lawyer's precision. "Thought family only meant struggling bookstore clerks welcome." The words hit like physical blows, each one designed to remind me of my place in their hierarchy. I was the one who drove a car with 150,000 miles, the one who lived in a studio apartment above Mrs. Chen's bakery, the one who chose books over bling. "I just wanted to see if he was okay," I whispered, hating how my voice shook. Vivian's laugh was sharp enough to cut. "Since when do you care about family? You skip every important event. You never visit." "That's not true. I visit him every—" "What? Once a year?" Marcus interrupted. "Face it, Emma, you're here because you smell money." The accusation stung because it was so far from the truth it made me dizzy. They didn't know about our Tuesday visits. They'd never bothered to know. Patricia moved closer, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I think it would be best if you left. This is a delicate time and we need to focus on what's important." I glanced around the room and noticed none of them had even asked how Grandpa was feeling. They hadn't brought flowers or soup, or asked about his medication. Their expensive purses sat strategically placed near his bedside table where his will was rumored to be kept. The message was clear. I wasn't important. I never had been. But as I turned to leave, Grandpa's eyes fluttered open. His gaze found mine across the room, and he mouthed a single word. Tuesday. Our secret. Our routine. Our connection they knew nothing about. I nodded, and for the first time since arriving, I smiled. 3 weeks later, I walked into Grandpa's mansion with homemade soup in one hand and a folder of research in the other. He'd asked me to look into the land behind the storage shed, what the rest of the family called the junk graveyard. Did you find anything? He asked, eyes lighting up. I found everything, I said, heart pounding. Old Mill Creek, this land, it was a settlement site. In 1847, 3 runaway soldiers were seen digging here before they vanished, with millions in stolen gold. I thought he was just being sentimental about old family stories. Turns out he'd been hiding a map, sort of. His hand tightened around mine. I knew you'd see the pattern, he whispered. You always could. But before he could say more, the wolves arrived, heels clicking, perfume suffocating, voices sharp as razors. Well, well, what do we have here? Vivian's voice dripped with false sweetness as she swept into the room, followed by the rest of my family like a pack of designer-clad wolves. Having a little private party, are we? The silence that followed was different than their usual mockery. Colder, more dangerous. We were just discussing, I started. History research, Marcus finished, reading over my shoulder. His voice dropped to a whisper. Oh my God, Emma, are you seriously playing treasure hunter with a sick old man? Vivian moved closer, studying my papers with predatory interest. The one above the bakery? With the water stains? Derek was already reaching for my folder with practiced legal precision. Runaway soldiers? He didn't laugh this time. He studied the documents with narrowed eyes. The research was ripped from my hands before I could react. Derek flipped through my carefully organized work, hours of cross-referencing historical records, newspaper archives, land surveys, with the same expression he'd wear examining a court filing. Derek stopped flipping, his brow furrowed. For the first time, he wasn't mocking me. He was calculating. This is... He paused, and I saw something flicker across his face. Fear? This is quite detailed, Emma. Patricia moved to Grandpa's bedside, but her voice had lost its earlier sweetness. Dad, you shouldn't be encouraging her. Projects. It's not a project, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. These are historical records, newspaper articles. From 1847, Vivian interrupted, but she wasn't dismissive anymore. She was studying the coordinates I'd written down. Emma, even if this story were true... The way she trailed off told me everything. They were taking this seriously now. You know what this is really about, don't you? Marcus had found my notebook, filled with hours of meticulous research. But instead of mocking it, he was photographing the pages with his phone. Emma's found something, and she's hoping to cash in before anyone else notices. The same Emma, Vivian added, but her voice was thoughtful now, calculating. Who's been visiting every Tuesday for 3 years? Getting close to Grandpa, gaining his trust. Derek was still studying my maps, his lawyer's mind clearly working. She's actually mapped out specific locations. This isn't random fantasy. This is systematic research. The realization hit me like ice water. They weren't mocking me anymore. They were threatened by me. Look at this. Derek held up my notebook like evidence. She's got survey coordinates, historical cross-references, even geological surveys of the property. Patricia was no longer concerned with fake sweetness. Emma, sweetheart, Surely you understand that any significant discovery on this property would belong to the estate, to the family. The people who actually matter, Vivian added, but her earlier cruelty had been replaced by cold strategy. The people who'll inherit this land. Derek was already making notes in his phone. Emma, I hope you haven't shared this research with anyone else. As the family attorney, I'd hate to see you get yourself into legal trouble over misunderstandings about ownership. The threat was crystal clear, wrapped in lawyer's silk. I looked at Grandpa, searching his face for some sign of support. But he was watching the scene unfold with an expression I couldn't read, almost like he was waiting for something. I think, Patricia announced, it would be best if Emma took her research home and perhaps reconsidered sharing family business with outsiders. Agreed, Marcus said, but he was still photographing my work. Emma, maybe you should remember that loose lips can get people into serious trouble. As they filed out, each one taking photos of my carefully gathered evidence, Vivian paused at the doorway. Oh, and Emma? That studio apartment of yours? The one with the thin walls? You might want to be more careful about who you talk to on the phone. Sound carries in old buildings. The implication hit me like a slap. They'd been listening, watching, planning. But as I gathered my remaining papers with shaking hands, I noticed something they'd missed in their rush to steal my research. A small piece of paper had fallen under Grandpa's bed, one with coordinates and a name I'd been meaning to contact. Dr. Rebecca Torres, State University Archaeology Department. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. But first, I forwarded every document I had to Dr. Torres's email, along with a simple message. Emergency. Please review immediately. Then I waited. The next morning brought catastrophe. I arrived at Grandpa's property to find Marcus directing a construction crew toward the storage building. What are you doing? I demanded, running toward them. Marcus smiled, but it wasn't mocking anymore. It was cold, calculating. Emergency demolition. The building's structurally unsound. You can't tear it down. Grandpa's still alive. Mother has power of attorney for property maintenance, Derek said, appearing beside me with official papers. For safety reasons. They'd moved fast. Too fast. Which meant they believed my research was real. But as I watched the crew begin unloading equipment, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Dr. Torres here. Your research is extraordinary. Do not let them demolish anything. I'm contacting the State Historical Preservation Office immediately. Relief bloomed in my chest. They'd stolen my papers, but they couldn't steal my backup plan. Actually, I called out to the construction crew, you might want to wait on that demolition. Marcus spun around. What? I've been in contact with the State Archaeology Department. They're very interested in this site. I held up my phone, showing Dr. Torres's message. Emergency historical protection status has been filed. The color drained from Derek's face. You can't prove anything. I don't have to, I said calmly. Dr. Torres does. She's been researching this area for years. My documents just gave her the final pieces she needed. As my family stood frozen, watching their hasty plan crumble, I realized something profound. They'd always underestimated me because they measured worth in dollars and status symbols. They'd never bothered to notice that I measured it in knowledge, patience, and careful planning. Grandpa had seen that difference. That's why he'd trusted me with his secret. And tomorrow, when Dr. Torres arrived with her team, I would prove that the smallest bank account in the family had uncovered the greatest treasure. The call came the next morning while I was opening the bookstore, still reeling from the previous day's confrontation. Dr. Rebecca Torres's voice was tight with barely controlled excitement. Emma, what you found, it's extraordinary. The location you've pinpointed corresponds exactly with a lost Confederate treasury that historians have been trying to locate for over a century. My hands shook as I held the phone. A treasury? According to military records, deserters left with approximately $3 million in gold coins. That's worth roughly $400 million in today's market. Emma, if your grandfather's property sits on that site... The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering on the bookstore counter. $400 million. The storage building my family mocked. The junk pile they'd dismissed without a second thought. Emma. Are you there? I picked up the phone with trembling hands. Dr. Torres, are you certain? I've cross-referenced multiple historical sources. The coordinates match perfectly. I'm driving over with ground-penetrating radar. Can you meet me there in 2 hours? Yes, I'll be there. As I locked up the bookstore, my phone buzzed with a text from Vivian. Family meeting tonight. Grandpa's discussing the will. 7 p.m. sharp. Don't embarrass yourself. The irony was so perfect it made me laugh, a sound somewhere between hysteria and disbelief. Tonight, while they gathered to divide their prizes, I would be standing above the greatest treasure any of them could imagine. At the storage building, Dr. Torres's equipment confirmed what I'd hardly dared to believe. The radar showed massive metal deposits beneath the foundation. More importantly, she'd brought historical maps showing the exact spot where the deserters had been seen digging. I held my breath. If I was wrong, they'd laugh forever. If I was right, everything would change. Emma, she said, looking up from her equipment with awe. You've found one of the most significant archaeological sites in the region. The permits to excavate properly will take time, but you're looking at a discovery that will rewrite history books. And the gold? If even half of what the records suggest is down there? She shook her head. You'll never have to worry about money again. Ever. That evening I drove to Grandpa's mansion with Dr. Torres's business card burning in my pocket and a secret I could barely contain. For years I'd thought staying small kept the peace. But now I realized, peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from truth. But hidden in my purse was something else, something Dr. Torres had whispered about in excitement. The largest metal signature on the radar wasn't just gold coins. It was something massive, perfectly preserved, and potentially worth over $100 million by itself. The scene in Grandpa's study was exactly what I'd expected. My family sat in the expensive leather chairs they'd inherit, while I perched on the hard wooden stool they'd chosen for me. The message was unmistakable: know your place. Grandpa, looking stronger than he had in weeks, sat behind his massive oak desk with official papers spread before him. His lawyer, Mr. Henderson, cleared his throat and began reading the will. To my daughter Patricia, I leave my collection of antique cars valued at approximately $400,000. Patricia smiled smugly. To my grandson Marcus, I leave my stock portfolio, currently valued at $1.2 million. Marcus actually rubbed his hands together. To my granddaughter Vivian, I leave my jewelry collection and fine art, valued at approximately $800,000. Vivian's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. To my grandson Derek, I leave my investment properties in downtown Portland, valued at $2.1 million. Derek nodded as if this was his due. And finally, Mr. Henderson's voice grew softer, to my granddaughter Emma, I leave the storage building and the 5 acres of land surrounding it, along with all contents therein. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Marcus snorted. That scrap heap? Seriously. Vivian's laughter was musical and cruel. Oh, Emma, you get the rusty tools and broken lawn mowers. How fitting. It's probably worth $5,000, Derek mused, if someone wanted to pay for the privilege of hauling away decades of garbage. Patricia shook her head with mock sympathy. Well, dear, I suppose it's more than you had before. They thought it was trash, but I knew it was a throne. I listened to their mockery with a calm that surprised me. 6 months ago, their words would have sent me spiraling. But now, with Dr. Torres's card in my pocket and the knowledge of what lay beneath that worthless building, their cruelty felt like raindrops on bulletproof glass. "Thank you, Grandpa," I said. "I know exactly what to do with it." More laughter erupted around the room. "Take care of it?" Vivian gasped between giggles. "Emma, it's a condemned building full of rust and rodents." "The roof probably leaks," Marcus added. "You'll need tetanus shots just to walk inside." Derek leaned forward with calculated concern. "Actually, the land might be worth something if you clear the junk. Maybe 20,000. But Emma, before you do anything hasty, you should know. I've researched the legal implications of that treasure-hunting nonsense you've been spreading around. If you're thinking of making fraudulent claims about historical artifacts, well, that's federal crime territory." The threat hung in the air like smoke. "Actually," I said, my voice steady and clear, "I think I'll keep it exactly as it is, at least for now." "Why on earth would you do that?" Patricia asked. I pulled out my phone and showed them Dr. Torres's business card. "Because I've been doing research about the history of the land." The room went quiet. I could feel Derek's lawyer instincts sharpening. "What research?" Vivian's voice had lost its mocking edge. "Well," I said, settling back in my uncomfortable chair, "it turns out that land has quite a story. It used to be part of Old Mill Creek Settlement. And according to historical records, it's the last known location of a missing army treasury." Marcus frowned. "What kind of treasury?" $3 million in gold coins, stolen by deserters and buried somewhere in the area before they disappeared. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Derek was the first to recover. "Emma, making claims about buried treasure is one thing, but if you're planning to file false archaeological reports or defraud—" "Actually," I interrupted. Dr. Torres from the State University confirmed it. Ground-penetrating radar shows significant metal deposits directly beneath the storage building. The color drained from every face in the room except Grandpa's. His smile was wider than I'd seen in years. "Of course," I continued conversationally, "it could be nothing. But Dr. Torres seems quite confident. She's already contacted the State Archaeological Department about excavation permits." Derek was reaching for his phone. "We need to verify these claims immediately. Emma, if you filed false reports with state agencies—" "Dr. Torres will be here tomorrow with a full archaeological team," I said calmly. "I suppose we'll find out then." The transformation was instantaneous and beautiful. The same people who'd spent weeks treating me like an unwanted pest suddenly couldn't get close enough. "Emma, sweetie," Patricia's voice dripped honey, "perhaps we should discuss this as a family. Surely any significant find should be shared among—" "Actually," I interrupted, "according to Mr. Henderson, the storage building and all contents therein belong entirely to me. Isn't that right?" The lawyer nodded reluctantly. "The will is quite specific." Derek was frantically typing on his phone. "But there are legal precedents for family claims on archaeological discoveries, environmental impact studies, federal oversight requirements. All handled by Dr. Torres," I said sweetly. "She's quite thorough." "But Emma—" Vivian's voice was high and desperate now. "We're family. We should share in any good fortune." "Family," I repeated thoughtfully. "The same family that told me not to come to the hospital? The same family that stole my research notes and tried to demolish the site?" Derek looked up from his phone, face pale. "You can't prove we took anything." I smiled. "I don't need to. I sent copies to Dr. Torres weeks ago." The room erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped as my family tried to process the complete reversal of their fortunes. But through it all, Grandpa sat quietly, watching me with pride shining in his eyes. Then he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small envelope with my name on it. "Mr. Henderson," he said softly, "there's one more thing." Mr. Henderson took the envelope with careful hands. "This is a private letter from your grandfather, Emma, to be opened after the will reading." With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and unfolded the handwritten note. "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, it means you found the truth. I always knew you would. You've had the patience to see what others miss since you were small. I've been keeping something from the family, waiting for the right person to trust with it. 3 years ago, I uncovered a brass plate buried just under the soil near the storage building. It had initials and dates from 1847. I knew then that the old stories about buried gold might be true, but I also knew this family well enough to understand what would happen if they learned about it. They'd fight over money they hadn't earned, destroy everything valuable trying to grab their share. You're different, Emma. You visit because you love me, not because you want something from me. You listen to my stories. You bring soup. The storage building is yours, completely and legally. But more than that, you've earned the right to decide what happens to anything you find there. Be wise, be generous when you can, but never let anyone convince you that kindness makes you weak. All my love, Grandpa Joe. P.S. Check the old blue coffee tin on the workbench. I saved something for you. I looked up through tears to find my family staring at me with a mixture of desperation and dawning comprehension. "What does it say?" Vivian whispered. "It says," I folded the letter carefully, "that Grandpa knew exactly what he was doing." The next morning brought the most satisfying moment of my life. I stood beside Dr. Torres as Channel 7 News set up their cameras around the excavation site. My family arrived exactly as I'd expected, overdressed and overeager for their television debut. "Where should we position ourselves for the interviews?" Vivian demanded. "About that," I said calmly. "The news crew only wants to interview the actual landowner and the archaeological team." The reporter, Janet Clark, approached with her cameraman. "Ms. Emma Walsh, we're ready to begin filming." "Excuse me," Marcus interrupted, stepping forward with his most charming smile. "I'm Marcus Walsh, grandson of the previous owner. Perhaps you'd like to interview the family." "Sir, I need you to step back behind the police tape," a security officer interrupted. "This is an active archaeological site." As my family was escorted to the sidewalk, Janet Clark began the interview that would change my life forever. "This is Janet Clark reporting live from what experts are calling the most significant archaeological discovery in state history. I'm here with Emma Walsh, whose historical research led to the discovery of a Civil War-era treasure worth an estimated $400 million. The excavation revealed even more than Dr. Torres had predicted. The centerpiece was a pristine ceremonial cannon made of solid gold, never fired, worth over $120 million alone. Museums around the world competed for the chance to display it. 6 months later, I watched that news segment from my beautiful cottage built on the exact spot where the Army treasury had been found. I'd donated most of the artifacts to museums, keeping only enough to ensure I'd never worry about money again. Through my window, I could see the old mansion in the distance, a for sale sign planted in the overgrown lawn. No one wanted to buy a house with foundation problems that would cost $3 million to repair. On my bookshelf sat Grandpa's crossword puzzle book, pages still half filled with Tuesday mornings we'd never get back. Beside it, the small brass plate he'd found while gardening, the first clue that had started everything. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. I opened it to find Vivian standing on my porch, looking smaller somehow in her discount store clothes. "Emma," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to tell you something about those Tuesday visits." I waited. "I knew," she said, tears flowing freely now. "I knew you visited Grandpa every week. I saw your car there once, and I followed you. I watched you bring him soup and read to him and just sit with him. The admission hung between us like a bridge. I never said anything to the family because— She struggled with the words. Because I was jealous. You had something real with him. Something I'd never bothered to build. It's not too late, I said gently. Love isn't about inheritance or money. It's about showing up. She nodded through her tears. He saw something in you that we were too blind to recognize. The way you cared for him. That wasn't about money. That was about love. As Vivian walked away, I thought about what I'd really unearthed, beneath all that gold. True wealth isn't measured in dollars or possessions. It's measured in kindness given freely, in love offered without expectation. I still kept Grandpa's old thermos, the one I'd carried soup in every Tuesday. Now it sat on my kitchen counter, a reminder that the greatest treasures aren't found buried in the ground. They're found in choosing to see value in people rather than possessions. They're found in soup on sick days, in quiet Tuesday visits, in believing kindness is never wasted. The greatest treasure isn't gold, it's being seen for who you are, and choosing to stay kind anyway. And as the cameras faded and the world moved on, I held the thermos tight and whispered, "We did it, Grandpa. We did it."